I never thought the words accident and overdose would sound so terrifying until I heard my own son whispering them in my kitchen at midnight, planning my death like he was discussing the weather. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Margaret Chen, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 72 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I was wrong. Real heartbreak is hearing your only child plan your murder. Let me start from the beginning, because the devil truly is in the details, and I want you to understand how I ended up hiding at the top of my own stairs, listening to my son and his wife discuss the best way to kill me. Robert, my husband of 48 years, passed away last February. Heart attack, sudden and merciful, the doctor said. One moment he was reading the morning paper, complaining about the political headlines, and the next moment he was gone. After nearly 5 decades together, I felt like half of my soul had been ripped away. Our house on Maple Street had been our pride and joy. We bought it in 1984 when David was just a baby. Back when this neighborhood was considered up-and-coming. Now, with all the development and the new shopping centers, our modest 3-bedroom home was worth nearly $800,000. Robert always joked that we were sitting on a gold mine, but we never wanted to sell. This was our home, filled with memories of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and quiet evenings on the front porch. David, our only son, had been struggling financially for years. He worked as a real estate agent, but the market had been tough on him. He wasn't the most organized person, and frankly, he lacked the aggressive sales personality that seemed to be required these days. His wife Jessica was a different story entirely. Jessica had worked in marketing before they got married 8 years ago, but she quit her job after their wedding, claiming she wanted to focus on being a good wife. What she really focused on was spending money they didn't have. Designer handbags, expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, all charged to credit cards that David couldn't afford to pay. After Robert's funeral, I could see the stress lines deepening around David's eyes. He'd inherited his father's gentle nature, but not his practical wisdom. Robert had tried to teach him about budgeting and financial responsibility, but David always seemed to think money would just work itself out somehow. Mom, we're having a tough time with the mortgage, David confessed to me about 3 weeks after we buried his father. We were sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd bandaged his scraped knees and helped him with homework 30 years earlier. How much do you need, sweetheart? I asked, already reaching for my checkbook. Robert had left me comfortable, and David was my only child. What else was money for if not to help your family? Just $5,000 would help us catch up, he said. I not meeting my eyes. I wrote the check without hesitation. A mother's love doesn't come with conditions, and I believed that helping my son was what Robert would have wanted me to do. But $5,000 became $10,000 when their car broke down, then another $8,000 when Jessica needed emergency dental work that somehow required a trip to the most expensive cosmetic dentist in the city. Each time, David would call with that same defeated tone in his voice, and each time I would write the check. Mom, you're too generous. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had warned me when she saw Jessica loading shopping bags from Nordstrom into their car. That girl's got expensive tastes for someone whose husband can't afford them. I defended Jessica, the way you defend family even when you have doubts. She's young, I told Mrs. Patterson. She'll learn. But privately, I was starting to worry. Not about the money, I had plenty, but about what this dependency was doing to David. He seemed to be growing more anxious, more desperate, with each passing month. And Jessica was becoming more demanding. Maggie, when are you going to downsize? She asked me one evening in late September. They'd come for dinner, which had become a weekly tradition since Robert's death. This house is way too big for just you. And think of all the money you're spending on utilities and maintenance. I looked around my dining room, at the family photos covering every surface, at Robert's chair that I still couldn't bear to move. This is my home, Jessica. I'm not ready to leave it, but be practical, she pressed, her voice taking on that wheedling tone that always made me uncomfortable. You could sell this place, buy a nice little condo, and have hundreds of thousands left over. You could travel, enjoy yourself. I am enjoying myself, I replied firmly, right here, David shot Jessica a warning look, but she wasn't finished. I just think it's selfish to keep all that equity tied up in a house you barely use. What if something happened to you? David would have to deal with all of this. The word, selfish, stung, but I let it pass. At the time I thought Jessica was just being thoughtless, maybe even trying to help in her misguided way. I should have seen the signs. I should have recognized the way their visits became more frequent, but less warm. How Jessica would walk through my house, touching things, almost like she was taking inventory. How David would ask seemingly innocent questions about my insurance policies and my will. "Mom, you do have everything updated, right?" he asked one evening in early October. "I mean, since Dad passed. You've made sure all the beneficiaries are current." "Yes, sweetheart," I assured him. "Mr. Henderson at the law office helped me with everything. You're my sole beneficiary, just like we always planned." I caught the look that passed between David and Jessica, quick, but unmistakable. At the time, I thought it was relief. Now I know it was something much darker. The night that changed everything was October 23rd. I remember the date because it was exactly 8 months since Robert died, and I'd spent the day feeling particularly melancholy. David and Jessica had come for dinner, and we'd had a pleasant enough evening. Jessica had even complimented my pot roast, which was unusual for her. After dinner, they lingered longer than usual. I was tired, emotionally drained from the anniversary of grief, so I excused myself around 9:30 and went upstairs to bed. I took my evening medications, blood pressure pills, and a mild sleep aid that Dr. Martinez had prescribed to help with my insomnia since Robert's death. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, I was awakened by voices downstairs. The clock on my nightstand read 11:47 p.m. David and Jessica were still here, talking in what they thought were hushed tones in my kitchen. At first, I assumed they were just having a private conversation, maybe about their marriage or their finances. I tried to go back to sleep, but something in the cadence of their voices made me uneasy. They sounded intense, urgent. I got up and crept to the top of the stairs, telling myself I was just checking to make sure they were okay. The old wooden stairs creaked under my bare feet, and I froze, but their conversation continued uninterrupted. What I heard next will haunt me for the rest of my life. "The sleep medication is perfect," Jessica was saying. "Dr. Martinez prescribed it for her insomnia. If she accidentally took too many, combined with her blood pressure medication, it would look completely natural." My blood turned to ice. I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. "I don't know, Jess." David's voice was barely audible, but I could hear the conflict in it. "She's my mother, and she's going to die anyway," Jessica replied with a coldness that made my stomach lurch. "She's 72, David. She could go any day. We're just helping things along before she gets sick and spends all our inheritance on medical bills." "Our inheritance?" David's voice cracked slightly. "Don't be naive," Jessica snapped. "If you're her only child, this house alone will pay off all our debts and give us a fresh start, plus the life insurance policy, plus whatever else she has saved. We could finally have the life we deserve." I had to press my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But how would how would it happen? David asked, and I heard the terrible resignation in his voice. "My son, my baby boy, was actually considering this." "It's simple," Jessica said matter-of-factly. "I've been researching it online using the library computers, so there's no trail. We increase her sleep medication gradually over a few weeks, so her body gets used to higher doses. Then one night, we just give her a little too much. Combined with the blood pressure medication and her age, it'll look like she got confused and took extra pills by mistake. Happens to elderly people all the time." The world was spinning around me. I sank down onto the top step, my whole body shaking. "The timing is perfect," Jessica continued. "It's been almost 9 months since your dad died. People will think grief finally got to her. Very sad, very understandable." "Jesus, Jessica." David's voice was strained. "Don't get squeamish on me now," she said sharply. "We've talked about this. We're drowning in debt. The credit cards are maxed out, we're 3 months behind on the mortgage, and your real estate career is going nowhere. This is our only way out. But she's been helping us with pocket change." Jessica's voice rose slightly, then dropped back to a whisper. "5,000 here, 10,000 there. Do you know how much this house is worth? How much her life insurance policy is worth? We're talking about real money, David. Life-changing money." I heard a chair scrape across the kitchen floor. "I need to think about this," David said. "There's nothing to think about," Jessica replied. Unless you want to lose the house and file for bankruptcy. Unless you want to watch me leave you for someone who can actually provide for me. Because that's what's going to happen if we don't fix this situation. The silence that followed was deafening. Then I heard David's voice, so quiet I had to strain to hear it. How long would it take? The medication thing? A few weeks to build up her tolerance. Maybe a month to be safe. We start this weekend? I couldn't listen anymore. On trembling legs, I crept back to my bedroom and quietly closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, my whole body shaking, trying to process what I'd just heard. My son, the baby I'd nursed through colic, the toddler I'd chased around this very house, the young man I'd cheered for at graduation, was planning to kill me. Not in a moment of rage or passion, but carefully, methodically. Over the course of weeks. And Jessica, the woman I'd welcomed into my family, was the architect of it all. I heard them moving around downstairs for another 20 minutes before finally leaving. I listened to David's car start up and drive away, and only then did I allow myself to cry. I cried for the son I thought I knew. I cried for the family dinners that had been a lie. I cried for Robert, wishing desperately that he were here to help me figure out what to do. But most of all, I cried because I knew that no matter how much it was going to hurt, I had to find a way to protect myself from the people I loved most in the world. The worst part wasn't the fear, though I was terrified. The worst part was the loneliness, the crushing realization that I was truly alone now, in a way I'd never been before. As I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to every creak and settling sound of the house I'd called home for nearly 40 years, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to fight back. I just had to figure out how. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Jessica's cold voice saying, "She's going to die anyway." Every creak of the house made me wonder if they'd come back. Every ring of the phone made my heart race. On the 4th day, exhaustion finally overtook fear, and I managed a few hours of fitful rest. But when I woke up, the nightmare was still real. My son was planning to kill me, and I had no idea what to do about it. The first thing I did was hide my medications. I gathered all my prescription bottles from the bathroom and kitchen and locked them in the fireproof safe where Robert had kept our important documents. If they were planning to use my pills against me, they'd have to find them first. Then I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to think like Robert would have. He'd always been the practical one, the problem solver. "What would you do?" I whispered to his empty chair. The answer came to me in his voice, as clear as if he were sitting right there. "Document everything, Maggie. Evidence first, emotion second." So I started a journal. Not the pretty leather, bound kind I'd always meant to keep, but a simple composition notebook from the drugstore. I wrote down everything I remembered from that terrible night, every word, every tone, every horrifying detail. My hand shook so badly I could barely read my own writing, but I kept going. I dated every entry and noted the time. I wrote down their previous visits, how often they'd asked about my will, the way Jessica had been, taking inventory, of my house. Looking back with new eyes, the pattern was obvious and chilling. The hardest part was accepting that David was truly involved. Part of me kept hoping that Jessica had manipulated him, that he was just going along with her plans without really meaning it. But I kept hearing his voice asking, how long would it take? My son had made his choice. On Friday, just 3 days after I'd overheard their conversation, David called. "Hey Mom, how are you feeling?" His voice sounded normal, concerned even. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought he was just checking on his grieving mother. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "You sound tired. Are you sleeping okay?" The question hit me like a physical blow. He was checking to see if the sleep medication was working, probably preparing for the next phase of their plan. "Oh, I said carefully, some nights are better than others. Are you taking your medicine regularly? Dr. Martinez said it was important to take it every night, remember?" There it was. He was already planting the seed, making sure I was taking the pills they planned to use against me. "Yes, I'm taking everything the doctor prescribed," I lied smoothly. In reality, I hadn't touched any medication since the night I overheard them. "Good. Jessica and I were thinking of coming by Sunday for dinner, if that's okay?" My stomach clenched. "Of course, honey. You're always welcome." After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a long time. How was I supposed to act normal? How was I supposed to cook dinner for people who were planning my murder? That's when I realized I needed help. But who could I trust? Mrs. Patterson next door was sweet, but she was 85 and lived alone herself. My few remaining friends from the hospital where I'd worked were scattered across the country. David had been my primary support system since Robert died, and now… Then I remembered Elena. Elena Rodriguez was my home health aide, assigned by the insurance company after Robert's death. She came twice a week to help with household tasks and to check on my general well-being. At first, I'd resisted the idea. I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself, but the insurance covered it, and David had insisted it would give him peace of mind. Now I wondered if David had been planning this even then, making sure there was a witness to my supposed decline. Elena was different from what I'd expected. She was younger, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't treat me like an invalid or speak to me in that condescending tone some people use with elderly clients. She treated me like a person, and over the past few months, I'd come to look forward to her visits. More importantly, Elena was smart. She'd been a nurse in Mexico before immigrating to the United States. Language barriers and licensing issues had forced her into home health care, but I could tell she saw things that others might miss. If I was going to trust anyone with the truth, it would be Elena. She was scheduled to come Tuesday morning. I spent the weekend in a state of barely controlled panic, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking the locks on my doors. When David and Jessica came for Sunday dinner, I thought I might collapse from the stress of acting normal. "You look tired, Mom," David said as I served the pot roast. The same meal I'd made the night I overheard them planning my death. "I haven't been sleeping well," I replied, which was certainly true. Jessica leaned forward with fake concern. "Are you taking your medication? Maybe you should talk to Dr. Martinez about increasing the dosage." I met her eyes across the table, wondering if she could see that I knew. "I'll consider it. It's so important to get proper rest at your age," she continued. "Poor sleep can affect your memory, your judgment. You could make mistakes with your medications." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was already building the narrative for my accidental overdose right there at my dinner table. David seemed uncomfortable with Jessica's directness. "Mom's always been sharp as a tack," he said quietly. "Of course she has." Jessica smiled, but her eyes were cold. "But grief can affect people in unexpected ways." "Can it, Maggie?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my dinner plate at her perfectly made-up face. Instead, I smiled back and said, "Grief teaches you who people really are." If she caught the double meaning, she didn't show it. They left around 8 o'clock, and I spent the rest of the evening writing in my journal, documenting every word of our conversation. I was building a case, though I wasn't sure yet what I planned to do with the evidence. Tuesday morning couldn't come fast enough. When Elena arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, I was waiting by the door. "Mrs. Chen?" she said, immediately noticing my agitation. "Are you all right?" "Elena," I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm, "I need to talk to you about something very serious. And I need to know that you'll keep what I tell you completely confidential." She studied my face carefully, then nodded. "Of course." "What's wrong?" I led her to the living room and gestured for her to sit down. For a moment I couldn't find the words. "How do you tell someone that your own child wants you dead?" "Elena," I began slowly, "do you think I'm losing my mind? Have you noticed any signs of dementia or confusion during your visits?" She looked surprised by the question. "No, Mrs. Chen, not at all." "You're one of the sharpest clients I have?" "Why would you ask that?" "Because I'm about to tell you something that sounds crazy, and I need to know if you think I'm imagining things." I took a deep breath and told her everything. About the conversation I'd overheard, about David and Jessica's financial problems, about their plan to gradually increase my medication until they could stage an accidental overdose. Elena listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with every word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Chen," she said finally, "this is not something you're imagining, and it's not the first time I've seen something like this." The relief I felt at being believed was overwhelming. "Really?" "Unfortunately, yes. Elder abuse is more common than people think, and financial abuse by family members is one of the most frequent forms. The fact that they're planning to hurt you physically makes this extremely serious." She leaned forward, her voice urgent. "Mrs. Chen, you need to report this to the police." "I can't," I said immediately. "David is my son. I can't send my own child to prison, even if he's planning to kill you." The blunt question hit me like a slap. I keep thinking maybe I can talk to him, make him see reason. Maybe Jessica is manipulating him, and if I can just reach him. Elena shook her head firmly. Mrs. Chen, I understand this is your son, but you heard what you heard. He's actively participating in a plan to murder you. Your life is in danger. But what if I'm wrong? What if I misunderstood? Did you misunderstand? She asked gently. I thought about Jessica's cold calculation, about David asking how long it would take, about their visit Sunday night, and the way they talked about my medications. No. I whispered. I didn't misunderstand. Then you have to protect yourself. Not just from Jessica, but from David too. The finality of those words settled over me like a shroud. My son, the child I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, was truly planning to kill me. There was no misunderstanding, no manipulation I could undo, no love that could save us. What do I do? I asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, thinking. First, we document everything. You said you've been keeping a journal. I nodded and showed her the composition notebook. She read through my entries, her expression growing grimmer with each page. This is good, she said. Very detailed. But we need more than just your word about what you heard. We need proof. How do I get proof? We record them, Elena said simply. The next time they come over, we make sure you have a way to record their conversation. The idea terrified me. What if they find out? What if they decide not to wait? Or Mrs. Chen, they're already not waiting. They've started the process. Every day you delay is another day they have to hurt you. She was right, and I knew it. But the thought of actively setting a trap for my own son made me feel sick. I know this is hard, Elena said softly. But think about it this way, if David is truly being manipulated by Jessica, then exposing her plan might save him too. Right now, he's heading toward a murder conviction. If you can prove that Jessica is the mastermind, maybe David can get help instead of a life sentence. It was a thin hope, but it was something to hold on to. Maybe I wasn't just protecting myself. Maybe I was saving David from Jessica's influence and from the terrible thing he was about to do. Okay, I said finally. How do we do it? Elena smiled for the first time since I'd started my story. Leave that to me. I have some ideas. As she gathered her cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, Elena turned back to me with a serious expression. Mrs. Chen, until we get this recorded evidence, you need to be very careful. Don't eat or drink anything they give you. Don't let them handle your medications. And if you feel like you're in immediate danger, call 911 immediately. Promise me? I promise. After she left, I sat in my living room looking around at the house I'd loved for 40 years. Everything looked the same: the family photos, Robert's reading chair, the Afghan my mother had crocheted, but everything felt different. This wasn't my safe haven anymore. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. That night, I called David to cancel our regular Friday dinner. I'm not feeling well, I told him, which wasn't entirely a lie. The stress was making me nauseous and giving me headaches. Are you taking your medication? He asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice. Real concern, or concern about his timeline? I'm taking everything I need to take, I said carefully. Maybe we should come over anyway, he said. Jessica could make that soup you like. The thought of Jessica in my kitchen with access to my food made my skin crawl. No, honey, I think I just need to rest. Are you sure? We don't mind. I'm sure. I'll call you if I need anything. After I hung up, I realized this was probably the first time in my adult life that I'd lied to David about being sick to avoid seeing him. When he was young, he was the one who tried to fake illness to get out of school. Now I was faking illness to avoid being murdered by my own child. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it wasn't funny either. It was just heartbreaking. That night, I did something I hadn't done since Robert died. I prayed. Not the casual blessing over dinner, but real prayer. The kind you do when you're desperate and scared and don't know where else to turn. I prayed for wisdom. I prayed for courage. And despite everything, I prayed for David's soul. Because no matter what he was planning to do to me, he was still my son. And somewhere, buried under Jessica's influence and his own desperation, was the boy who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. I had to believe that boy was still in there. I had to believe there was still something worth saving. Even if saving him meant destroying the life we'd built together. Even if saving him meant accepting that our relationship, as I'd known it, was already over. Elena arrived the following Thursday, carrying a small shopping bag, along with her usual cleaning supplies. She looked around carefully before closing the front door behind her. How are you holding up, Mrs. Chen? She asked, studying my face with those sharp, observant eyes. I haven't slept much, I admitted. Every time the phone rings, I think it's David calling to come over. Every time I hear a car in the driveway, I panic. That's understandable. But today we're going to start taking back control. She reached into her shopping bag and pulled out a small black device, about the size of a deck of cards. This is a digital voice recorder. My cousin works in security, and he helped me pick out something that would work for what we need. I stared at the device like it was a snake. I don't know if I can do this, Elena. Mrs. Chen? Look at me. She sat down beside me on the couch and took my hands. I've been thinking about this all week. What David and Jessica are planning isn't just wrong, it's evil. And if you don't stop them, they will kill you. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but they will do it. The certainty in her voice sent a chill through me. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen this before, she said quietly. Not exactly this, but similar situations. When people convince themselves that an elderly person is better off dead, when they start seeing dollar signs instead of a human being, they don't usually change their minds, they escalate. She was right, and I knew it. Jessica's cold calculation. David's growing desperation. This wasn't going to go away on its own. Show me how it works, I said. Elena smiled and demonstrated the recorder. It was surprisingly simple, just a power button and a record button. The device was small enough to hide in my pocket or under a couch cushion, and sensitive enough to pick up conversation from across a room. The battery lasts for about 8 hours of recording, Elena explained. And it has enough memory for dozens of hours of audio. You can start recording before they arrive and just leave it running. What if they find it? That's why we're going to practice different hiding spots. And Mrs. Chen? If they do find it, you call 911 immediately. Don't try to explain, don't try to smooth things over. You call for help. We spent the next hour testing different locations in my living room and kitchen. Under the couch cushions was good for recording conversations in the living room. Tucked behind the sugar canister on the kitchen counter worked well for dinner table conversations. Elena even showed me how to tape it under the dining room table, though that required me to get on my hands and knees, which at my age was no small feat. The key is to act completely normal, Elena coached me. Don't mention anything about medications or money or your will. Let them bring those topics up naturally. If they're planning what we think they're planning, they won't be able to help themselves. What if David has second thoughts? What if he's changed his mind? Elena looked at me with sympathy. Mrs. Chen, I hope that's the case. I really do. But if he has changed his mind, then recording their conversation won't hurt anything. And if he hasn't, she didn't need to finish the sentence. After Elena left, I practiced with the recorder for hours. I must have turned it on and off 50 times, trying different hiding spots, testing how clearly it picked up my voice from different parts of the room. The whole exercise felt surreal, like I was preparing to spy on my own family. Which, I supposed, I was. That evening, David called. Mom, I was thinking we could come over this Sunday for dinner, if you're feeling better. My heart started pounding immediately. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. Great. Jessica's been worried about you. She has some ideas about things that might help with your sleep problems. I bet she does, I thought grimly. I'm looking forward to seeing you both. After I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. Sunday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare myself mentally for what might be the most important conversation of my life. I spent Friday practicing with the recorder and going over my journal entries. I tried to anticipate what David and Jessica might say, how I should respond to seem natural. It felt like preparing for a performance, except the stakes were life and death. Saturday morning, Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door. She was carrying a casserole dish and wearing her concerned neighbor expression. Maggie dear, I wanted to bring you some of my tuna casserole. You've seemed so tired lately. I accepted the casserole gratefully and invited her in for coffee. Mrs. Patterson had been my neighbor for 23 years. She'd watched David grow up, attended his high school graduation, even helped me plan his wedding reception. If anyone would understand the impossible situation I was in, it might be her. Helen, I said carefully as we sat at my kitchen table, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Have you ever had to face the possibility that someone you love might not be who you thought they were? Mrs. Patterson studied my face over her coffee cup. Maggie, is everything all right? You've seemed upset lately. I wanted desperately to tell her everything. The words were right there, pressing against my teeth, demanding to be spoken. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Fear or the deep-seated belief that family problems should stay within the family. I'm just having a hard time adjusting, I said finally. Sometimes I feel like I don't know anyone anymore. Grief changes everything, Mrs. Patterson said gently. After Henry died, I felt like I was living in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. Nothing made sense anymore. How did you get through it? One day at a time. And by accepting help when it was offered. She reached across the table and patted my hand. You know I'm always here if you need anything, don't you? Day or night? Thank you, Helen. That means more than you know. After she left, I regretted not telling her the truth. But maybe it was better this way. Mrs. Patterson was elderly herself, free, and I didn't want to burden her with something so horrible. Plus, if things went wrong on Sunday, I didn't want her to be in any danger. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I spent the morning cooking David's favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, homemade rolls, and apple pie for dessert. The same meal I'd made for countless birthdays and celebrations over the years. It felt like preparing a last meal, which in many ways it was. This would be the last time I cooked for my son with love in my heart. After today, everything would be different. An hour before David and Jessica were due to arrive, I positioned the recorder under the couch cushions in the living room. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it twice. I tested it one more time, whispering, testing, and then playing it back. My voice came through clearly, tinged with fear but audible. At exactly 5 o'clock I heard David's car in the driveway. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and went to meet them at the door. Mom. David hugged me warmly, and for a moment I almost forgot why I was so afraid. This was my son, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. Hello, sweetheart. I hugged him back, memorizing the feel of his arms around me, the familiar scent of his aftershave. Jessica followed with a bright smile and a bottle of wine.
Maggie!
You look so much better than when we talked to you last week. I'm feeling a bit stronger, I said, leading them into the living room. Right above where I'd hidden the recorder. We made small talk for a few minutes, the weather, David's work, Jessica's volunteer activities at the country club. Normal family conversation, the kind we'd had hundreds of times before. If I hadn't known what I knew, I would have enjoyed it. Mom, you really do look tired, David said, and I heard the calculation behind his concern. Are you sleeping at all? Some nights are better than others, I replied carefully. Jessica leaned forward with that fake concerned expression I'd come to hate. Maggie, I've been doing some research about sleep problems in older adults. There are some really effective approaches that might help. Here it comes, I thought. Oh, what kind of approaches? Well, sometimes people develop a tolerance to their current medication. The body gets used to the dosage, and it stops being effective. When that happens, free doctors usually recommend gradually increasing the amount until you find the right level again. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. That's interesting. The key word is gradually, Jessica continued. You can't just jump to a higher dose all at once. That could be dangerous, but if you increase it slowly, your body adapts, and eventually you find the dose that works. She was laying out their murder plan right there in my living room, disguised as helpful advice about sleep medication. Have you talked to Dr. Martinez about this? David asked. Not yet, I said. I wasn't sure if the medication was the problem. Oh, it almost certainly is, Jessica said confidently. Especially combined with grief and stress. Your body is probably crying out for more help than you're giving it. Jessica's been reading about this for weeks. David added. She's really concerned about you. I'm sure she is, I thought bitterly. Concerned that I might die of natural causes before they can kill me themselves. Maybe I should try taking a little extra tonight, I said, watching their faces carefully. The look that passed between them was so quick I almost missed it, but it was their excitement, anticipation, satisfaction. Well, you shouldn't make any changes without talking to your doctor, David said, but his tone suggested the opposite. Although, Jessica added casually, one extra pill probably wouldn't hurt anything, just to see if it helps. Jessica's right, David said quickly. What harm could one extra pill do? I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to ask how they could sit in my living room, eating my food, pretending to love me, while planning my death. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully. Maybe I'll try that. Dinner conversation was surreal. They asked about my friends, my health, my plans for the holidays. Jessica complimented my cooking. David told funny stories from work. Anyone listening would have thought we were a normal, loving family sharing a Sunday meal. But underneath it all, I could feel their impatience, their eagerness to move to the next phase of their plan. Every time the conversation lulled, one of them would bring up my sleep problems again. "You know, Mom," David said as I served the apple pie, "if the medication adjustment works, you should probably stick with it. Don't second-guess yourself if you start sleeping better." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes people worry they're becoming dependent on medication," Jessica explained. "But at your age, quality of life is what matters most. If taking a little extra helps you sleep, that's not dependency, that's medical management." They were giving me permission to overdose myself. No, more than permission, they were encouraging it. "That makes sense," I said quietly. "And Mom," David reached across the table and squeezed my hand, "promise me you won't suffer in silence. If you're having trouble sleeping, just take what you need to take, okay?" The sincerity in his voice was almost convincing. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought he genuinely cared about my well-being. "I promise," I said, squeezing his hand back. After they left around 8:30, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the couch cushion that hid the recorder. I couldn't bring myself to listen to the conversation yet. I wasn't ready to hear my son's voice planning my death. Instead, I called Elena. "Mrs. Chen, how did it go?" "They did it," I said simply. "They told me exactly what you said they would. They want me to start increasing my sleep medication." "Did you get it recorded?" "Yes, all of it." Elena was quiet for a moment. "How are you feeling?" "Empty," I said honestly. "Completely empty. Mrs. Chen, I know this is the hardest thing you've ever had to do, but you've just potentially saved your own life and destroyed my relationship with my son." "Mrs. Chen," Elena said gently, "your son destroyed that relationship when he decided you were worth more to him dead than alive. You didn't make this choice. He did." After we hung up, I finally retrieved the recorder from under the couch cushion. My hands were steady now, steadied by a cold determination I didn't know I possessed. I played the entire conversation back, listening to myself laugh at David's jokes, compliment Jessica's appearance, discuss the weather and politics, and all the mundane topics that families talk about. And threading through it all, like poison in the water supply, was their careful, calculated plan to kill me. The recording was perfect. Every word was clear, every inflection audible. Jessica's research about gradually increasing medication, David's encouragement to take what you need to take, their excited glances when I suggested trying an extra pill, it was all there, recorded in their own voices. I had the evidence I needed to destroy my son's life. The question was, did I have the courage to use it? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I kept replaying the recording, trying to find some other interpretation for what I'd heard, some way to explain away Jessica's careful instructions about medication tolerance, or David's encouragement to take what you need to take. There wasn't one. By morning, I'd listened to the recording 6 times. Each time, the truth became more undeniable. My son wasn't being manipulated or coerced. He was an active, willing participant in planning my murder. Elena arrived Tuesday morning to find me sitting at my kitchen table, still in my bathrobe, with the recorder and my journal spread out in front of me. "Mrs. Chen, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" "I can't stop listening to it," I said, gesturing to the recorder. "I keep thinking maybe I missed something. Maybe there's another explanation." Elena sat down across from me and picked up the recorder. "May I?" I nodded, and she played back the section where Jessica explained about gradually increasing medication dosages. Even hearing it for the 7th time, I felt sick to my stomach. "Or Mrs. Chen," Elena said when the recording finished, "there is no other explanation. This is exactly what we thought it was." But David sounded so sincere when he said he was worried about me. "That's what makes this so insidious," Elena replied. "Abusers often convince themselves they're doing something good for their victim. Jessica has probably told David that you'd be better off dead, that you're suffering, that this would be merciful. Do you think he believes that?" Elena was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "Mrs. Chen, it doesn't matter what David believes. What matters is what he's planning to do." She was right, of course, but it didn't make the pain any less sharp. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Now we take this to the police." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Elena, I can't. He's my son, and he's planning to kill you," she said firmly. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to really think about this. If you don't report this, what do you think will happen next?" I knew the answer, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. "They'll escalate," Elena continued. Maybe they'll start tonight, maybe next week, but they will start increasing your medication. And once they do, you'll be in real physical danger. Your judgment might become impaired. Your reflexes will slow down. You might not be able to protect yourself. But if I report this, David will go to prison. If you don't report this, David will be a murderer. The stark truth of that statement left me speechless. Elena was right by exposing David's plan. I might actually be saving him from committing an even worse crime. There's something else you need to consider, Elena said gently. Do you think you're the first person they've thought about doing this to? What do you mean? Jessica seemed awfully knowledgeable about medication interactions and gradual dosage increases. That kind of information, it's very specific, very detailed. The implication hit me like ice water in my veins. You think they've done this before? I think it's possible, and if they have, and you don't report this, there might be other victims. Other elderly people who died of accidental overdoses. I had never considered that possibility, but now I couldn't stop thinking about it. How many other families had Jessica wormed her way into? How many other elderly relatives had become inconvenient obstacles to her financial plans? I need time to think, I said. Elena nodded understandingly, of course. But Mrs. Chen, don't take too long. Every day you wait is another day they can hurt you. After Elena left, I spent the morning pacing around my house, trying to imagine my life after I made this choice. Because there would be no going back. Once I accused David of planning to murder me, our relationship would be over forever. Even if somehow he was found innocent, even if Jessica had manipulated him more than I realized, he would never forgive me for reporting him to the police. I would lose my son either way, but if I didn't report him, I would lose my life. Around noon, the phone rang. It was David. Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today? I'm okay, sweetheart. My voice sounded surprisingly normal. Did you try what Jessica suggested last night? About the medication? My hand tightened on the phone. He was checking to see if I'd started drugging myself yet. I took an extra pill. I lied. I think it helped. That's great. See, Jessica knows what she's talking about. The enthusiasm in his voice made me nauseous. He was genuinely excited that I was supposedly beginning to overdose myself. David, I said carefully. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you love me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What? Of course I love you, Mom. Why would you ask that? Since Dad died, I sometimes feel like I'm all alone in the world. Mom, you're not alone. Jessica and I are here for you. We're going to take care of you. The irony of those words was overwhelming. They were going to take care of me, all right? I love you too, David, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, despite what he was planning to do, I still loved my son. I know, Mom. And I want you to know that whatever happens, I'll make sure you're comfortable. I'll make sure you don't suffer. There it was again, that twisted mercy. That belief that killing me would somehow be a kindness. Thank you, sweetheart, I said quietly. After I hung up, I sat in Robert's chair and tried to imagine what he would want me to do. Robert had always been protective of family, but he'd also been fiercely moral. He wouldn't have tolerated this kind of betrayal, not even from his own son. Help me, Robert, I whispered to the empty room. I don't know how to do this alone. That afternoon, I made my decision. I called the police station and asked to speak with someone about elder abuse. The dispatcher was kind but professional, asking basic questions about my situation. When I explained that I believed my son was planning to kill me, there was a long pause. Ma'am, this is a very serious allegation. I'm going to connect you with Detective Walsh from our elder abuse unit. She'll want to meet with you in person to discuss this. Detective Sarah Walsh arrived at my house 2 hours later. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 40s, with graying hair and kind but sharp eyes. She reminded me a little of Alina, someone who had seen enough of the world to take things seriously, but who still had compassion for the people caught up in terrible situations. Mrs. Chen, thank you for calling us, she said as I invited her into my living room. I know this couldn't have been an easy decision. It wasn't, I admitted. I'm still not sure I'm doing the right thing. Why don't you tell me what's been happening? And we'll figure out the right thing together. So I told her everything. About David and Jessica's financial problems, about the conversation I'd overheard, about Sunday night's dinner and their encouragement to increase my medication. Detective Walsh listened without interruption, taking notes in a small notebook. When I finished, she asked, "Do you have any evidence to support what you're telling me?" I handed her the recorder. I recorded Sunday night's conversation. Detective Walsh's eyebrows rose slightly as she examined the device. Mrs. Chen, did you record this conversation with their knowledge? No. Was that wrong? Actually, in this state, you're allowed to record conversations that take place in your own home without the other party's consent. This could be very valuable evidence. She listened to portions of the recording, her expression growing more serious with each exchange. Mrs. Chen, this is extremely concerning. What your son and daughter-in-law are describing, gradually increasing medication to build tolerance, then giving just a little extra. This isn't accidental overdose planning. This is premeditated murder. Hearing those words from a police officer made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't family drama or financial desperation. This was murder, plain and simple. What happens now? I asked. Now we build a case, Detective Walsh said. But Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you prepared to testify against your son if this goes to trial? The question hung in the air between us like a sword. Testifying against David meant looking him in the eye in a courtroom and telling a jury that he had planned to kill me. It meant sending my own child to prison. I don't know, I said honestly. I understand, Detective Walsh said gently. This is an impossible situation, but I need you to understand that without your testimony, we might not be able to protect you or prosecute them. The recording is powerful evidence, but we need you to be willing to stand behind it. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. But Mrs. Chen, while you're thinking, we need to keep you safe. Based on what they said Sunday night, they're expecting you to start taking extra medication. When you don't start showing signs of increased drowsiness or confusion, they might get suspicious. What do you suggest? I suggest we set up surveillance on your house and possibly arrange for you to stay somewhere else for a few days while we decide how to proceed. The idea of leaving my home, the home Robert and I had shared for 40 years, was almost unbearable. But the alternative was potentially dying in that same home at the hands of my own son. There's somewhere else we could go with this? Detective Walsh said carefully. We could arrange a controlled meeting, set up surveillance and recording equipment, let them come over for another dinner, and see if we can get them to be even more explicit about their plans. You mean like a sting operation? Something like that. It would give us stronger evidence, but it would also put you at greater risk. I thought about Sunday night's dinner, about sitting across from David and Jessica while they encouraged me to kill myself with medication. Could I do that again, knowing that police officers were listening from outside? I need to think about all of this, I said. Detective Walsh nodded and handed me her card. Mrs. Chen, I want you to call me immediately if anything changes. If they come over unexpectedly, if they bring you food or medication, if you feel unsafe in any way. Day or night, okay? After she left, I sat in my living room holding her business card, feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Once I jumped, there would be no going back. But staying where I was meant certain death. That evening, Jessica called. Maggie, how are you feeling today? David said you tried the medication adjustment last night. I did. I think it helped. That's wonderful. You see, sometimes we just need to be our own advocates with healthcare. Doctors don't always know what's best for individual patients. The casual way she talked about medication overdoses as advocacy was chilling. Jessica, I said, can I ask you something? Of course. Have you ever helped anyone else with sleep problems? You seem to know so much about medication management. There was a pause, just a split second, but I caught it. Oh, I've done a lot of research, she said quickly. Online health forums, medical websites. When you care about someone, you learn what you need to learn? That's very thoughtful of you. Well, we're family. David and I just want what's best for you. After I hung up, I realized that Detective Walsh had been right. Jessica's knowledge was too detailed, too specific, to have come from casual internet research. She had done this before. Which meant I wasn't just protecting myself. I was potentially stopping a serial killer. That night, I made my final decision. I called Detective Walsh and told her I was ready to cooperate fully with the investigation, including testifying if necessary. Mrs. Chen, are you sure? I'm sure, I said, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm. What do we do next? Next? We catch them in the act. Detective Walsh returned the next morning with a team of 3 other officers and enough electronic equipment to stock a spy movie. They transformed my quiet house into a surveillance operation in less than 2 hours. Mrs. Chen, we're going to place cameras in your living room and kitchen. Detective Walsh explained as technicians worked around us. They're so small you won't even notice them, and neither will David and Jessica. We'll also have officers stationed outside in unmarked vehicles. I watched the technicians tape tiny cameras behind picture frames and inside decorative objects I'd owned for years. It felt like a violation, but I reminded myself that David and Jessica had violated something far more sacred when they decided I was worth more to them dead. What exactly do you need them to say? I asked. Ideally, we need them to explicitly discuss harming you. The recording you made Sunday night is good evidence, but it could be interpreted as misguided medical advice. We need something that clearly shows intent to cause death. And if they don't say anything incriminating, Detective Walsh looked at me seriously. Then we'll have to consider other options. But Mrs. Chen, based on what I heard on that recording, I don't think we'll have to wait long. They're escalating, and escalation means mistakes. Alina arrived while the technicians were finishing up. She looked around at the equipment and officers with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Mrs. Chen, how are you holding up? I feel like I'm in someone else's life, I said honestly. Yesterday I was a lonely widow trying to figure out how to live without her husband. Today I'm bait in a murder investigation. You're not bait, Detective Walsh interjected. You're a survivor taking control of your situation. The distinction felt important, even if the reality was the same. The plan was simple. I would call David and invite them for dinner Friday night, just 3 days away. I would mention that I'd been taking the extra medication and that it was helping, which should encourage them to push for the next phase of their plan. Detective Walsh coached me on what to say and how to respond to their suggestions. The key is to seem receptive, but not too eager, she explained. You want them to feel like they're convincing you, not like you're leading them. What if they bring their own medication? What if they try to give me something directly? That's actually what we're hoping for, Detective Walsh said. If they bring pills or try to dissolve something in your food or drink, that's clear evidence of intent to poison you. We'll intervene before you're actually in danger. The waiting was the hardest part. I had 3 days to act normal, to not think about the cameras recording my every movement, to not imagine what Friday night might bring. On Thursday evening, I called David. Hi Mom, how are you doing? Much better. Actually, I said, trying to inject some energy into my voice. That suggestion Jessica made about the medication has really been helping. Really? That's great. I was wondering if you and Jessica would like to come for dinner tomorrow night. I feel like celebrating feeling better. Of course, we'd love to. Jessica will be so happy to hear that her advice worked. I bet she will, I thought grimly. Should I make pot roast again? That sounds perfect, Mom. You're sure you're feeling up to cooking? David, I feel better than I have since your father died. Whatever Jessica suggested, it's working. After I hung up, Detective Walsh nodded approvingly. Perfect. You sounded genuinely grateful and optimistic. If they're planning to escalate, that should trigger it. Friday arrived gray and cold, with a bitter wind that rattled the windows. I spent the day cooking, trying to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't race. Detective Walsh and her team arrived at 3 o'clock to make final preparations. Remember, she said as we went over the plan one last time. Act exactly like you did last Sunday. Same seating arrangement, same conversation topics. Let them guide the discussion about medication. What if David has second thoughts? What if seeing me happy makes him reconsider? Detective Walsh's expression was sympathetic but firm. Mrs. Chen. People who plan to murder family members for money don't usually change their minds because their victim seems happy. If anything, it might make them more eager to act before you spend more of their inheritance. At 5 o'clock, I heard David's car in the driveway. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to take deep breaths. Detective Walsh and her team were listening to every word. I wasn't alone. Mom! David hugged me warmly when I opened the door. You look fantastic. I haven't seen you this energetic in months. I feel wonderful, I said, and tried to mean it. Jessica's advice really made all the difference. Jessica beamed as if she'd personally cured cancer. I'm so glad, Maggie. Sometimes all it takes is the right approach to medication management. We settled in the living room, the same spots as the previous Sunday, right over the hidden cameras and microphones. I served drinks and cheese and crackers, playing the role of the grateful, recovered patient. Jessica, I can't thank you enough, I said. Taking that extra pill has changed everything. I'm sleeping through the night, I have energy during the day, I feel like myself again. That's wonderful, Jessica said. but I caught the quick glance she exchanged with David. How much extra have you been taking? Just one additional pill like you suggested. Another glance between them, this one longer. You know, Maggie, Jessica said carefully, if one extra pill helped that much, you might benefit from a slightly larger adjustment. Here we go, I thought. What do you mean? Well, sometimes people need to find their optimal dose through trial and error. If one extra pill helped, maybe 2 extra would help even more. 2 extra pills. I tried to sound uncertain rather than horrified. It's not unusual, David said, jumping in to support his wife. Jessica's been researching this extensively. The therapeutic range for sleep medication is much wider than doctors usually prescribe. I don't know, I said hesitantly. That seems like a lot. Maggie? Jessica leaned forward with that fake concerned expression. You just told us you feel better than you have since Robert died. Don't you want to continue feeling this good? Of course, but... Then trust the process, she said firmly. Sometimes we have to be willing to take control of our own health care. During dinner, they continued their campaign. David told stories about elderly patients at the real estate office who had struggled with sleep issues until they advocated for themselves with their doctors. Jessica shared anecdotes about online support groups where people had found relief by adjusting their medication appropriately. It was all lies, of course. Carefully constructed stories designed to make me comfortable with the idea of taking potentially lethal doses of sleep medication. Mom? David said as I served dessert. I brought you something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small pill bottle. These are the same sleep medication you're already taking, just a higher dose. Jessica thought it might be easier than counting out multiple pills. I stared at the bottle, my blood running cold. They had come prepared. They weren't just encouraging me to overdose myself, they were providing the means. Where did you get these? I asked. Jessica has a friend who's a nurse practitioner, David said smoothly. She was able to get us a few pills to try, just to see if a higher dose works better for you. Jessica nodded enthusiastically. Each pill is equivalent to about 3 of your regular doses, so instead of taking multiple pills and worrying about counting, you could just take one of these. Try one tonight, David encouraged. If it helps, we can talk to Dr. Martinez about adjusting your prescription. I held the bottle in my hands, knowing that Detective Walsh and her team were listening to every word. This was it, clear, undeniable evidence of intent to poison me. I don't know, I said hesitantly. It seems like such a big jump. Maggie, Jessica's voice took on a sharper edge. You're overthinking this. You just spent an hour telling us how much better you feel with the adjustment we already suggested. This is just the next logical step. Trust us, David said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. We want what's best for you. The sincerity in his voice was heartbreaking. He genuinely believed he was being helpful, even as he handed me the pills that were meant to kill me. Okay, I said finally. I'll try one tonight. The relief on their faces was unmistakable. Wonderful! Jessica clapped her hands together. You're going to sleep so well, Maggie. And tomorrow you'll feel even better than you do today. They left around 9 o'clock, both seeming satisfied that their plan was moving forward. Jessica hugged me goodbye and whispered, "Sweet dreams, Maggie." The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, Detective Walsh and her team came through my front door. "Mrs. Chen, are you all right?" Detective Walsh asked immediately. "I think so," I said, though my hands were shaking. "Did you get what you needed?" "We got everything," she said grimly. "The pills David gave you are a controlled substance, a powerful sedative that's not available without a prescription. Combined with your regular sleep medication, even one pill could be fatal for someone your age." I stared at the pill bottle in my hands. They really were trying to kill me? There's no doubt about it now. "Mrs. Chen, we're going to arrest David and Jessica tonight." The finality of those words hit me like a physical blow. After tonight, everything would be different. David would be in jail, facing murder charges. Our family would be destroyed, but I would be alive. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Detective Walsh. "Of course. Do you think David really believes he's helping me? Or does he know he's committing murder?" Detective Walsh was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Chen, I've been investigating elder abuse for 12 years. In my experience, people who plan to kill family members for money always find ways to justify it to themselves. They convince themselves it's merciful, or necessary, or somehow noble. But underneath all those justifications, they know exactly what they're doing. So David knows." "David knows?" she said gently. "I'm sorry." An hour later, I watched from my living room window as police cars pulled up in front of David's house across town. Detective Walsh had called to tell me they were making the arrests. And I found myself needing to witness this moment, even from a distance. I couldn't see much, just flashing lights and dark figures moving around. But I knew that somewhere in that chaos, my son was being handcuffed and read his rights. The phone rang around midnight. It was David, calling from the police station. "Mom." His voice was small, confused, like a child who'd been caught doing something wrong. "Hello, David." "Mom, there's been a terrible mistake. The police think Jessica and I were trying to hurt you." "But that's not true. We were trying to help." Even now, he couldn't admit the truth. "David," I said quietly, "I know what you were trying to do." There was a long silence on the line. "Mom, I love you. You have to believe that." "I know you do, sweetheart," I said, and meant it. "But love isn't always enough. Please don't let them do this to me. Please tell them it's all a misunderstanding." The desperation in his voice broke my heart, but I'd already made my choice. "I can't do that, David." "Mom, please. I'm your son. And I'm your mother," I replied. "Which is why I can't let you become a murderer." He was crying when he hung up. I sat in Robert's chair for the rest of the night, listening to the house settle around me. It felt different now, emptier but also safer. The threat was gone, but so was my family. As the sun came up, I realized that I would have to learn how to live alone all over again. Not just without Robert, but without the son I'd thought I knew. It was terrifying and heartbreaking and necessary. And for the first time in months, I was free to take as long as I needed to figure it out. The weeks following David and Jessica's arrest passed in a haze of legal proceedings, media attention, and soul-searching conversations with Detective Walsh. I learned more about my daughter-in-law in those weeks than I had in the 8 years she'd been part of our family. "Mrs. Chen, we've been investigating Jessica's background," Detective Walsh told me during one of our meetings at the police station. "What we've found is disturbing." She opened a thick file folder and spread several documents across the table between us. "Jessica Martinez, that was her maiden name, has been married 3 times. You and David represent her 4th marriage." "4 marriages?" I stared at the documents. "She told us she'd only been married once before, briefly, when she was young." That's what she told David. But it's not true. Her first husband was Marcus Webb, a 73-year-old widower she married when she was 26. He died 8 months after their wedding from what was ruled an accidental overdose of heart medication. My blood ran cold. 8 months. Her second husband was James Liu, 68, a retired engineer. He died 1 year after their marriage, also from an accidental overdose, this time diabetes medication combined with alcohol. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the photographs Detective Walsh had laid out, men who looked kind and trusting, not unlike Robert had in his later years. Her third husband was Ronald Martinez, which is where she got the last name she used when she married David. Ronald was 62, recently divorced, with a substantial retirement account. He died 14 months into their marriage. "Let me guess," I said weakly. "Accidental overdose, sleep medication, combined with blood pressure pills. Sound familiar?" I felt sick to my stomach. "How many people has she killed?" "We're still investigating, but based on what we've found so far, at least 3 husbands, possibly more. Jessica has a very specific pattern. She targets older men with money and no close family to ask questions. She marries them, gains access to their finances, and then kills them in ways that look accidental. But David isn't old or alone. He has me." Detective Walsh looked at me with sympathy. "Mrs. Chen, David was never Jessica's primary target." "You were." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "We think Jessica married David specifically to get access to you. A 72-year-old widow with a valuable house, life insurance, and substantial savings, whose only family is a financially struggling son. You fit her victim profile perfectly." I thought about all the times Jessica had asked about my finances, my will, my plans for the house, all the seemingly innocent questions about my health, my medications, my daily routines. "She was studying me," I said. "From the moment she met you. We found notebooks in her house, Mrs. Chen. Detailed notes about your habits, your medications, your relationships. She's been planning this for years." Detective Walsh showed me photocopies of pages covered in Jessica's neat handwriting. Notes about my sleep schedule, the timing of my medication doses, my friendship with Mrs. Patterson, my weekly visits with Alina. Every detail of my life cataloged like a hunting guide. "What about David?" I asked. "Was he part of this from the beginning?" That's harder to determine. We believe Jessica gradually manipulated him over time, especially after his father died and their financial situation became desperate. She likely convinced him that you were suffering, that you'd be better off dead, that this would be merciful. Do you think he would have gone through with it? Detective Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Chen, David brought you the pills. He encouraged you to take them. Whatever his motivations, he was an active participant in a plan that would have killed you. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, I'd already processed that. The hardest part was understanding how thoroughly Jessica had fooled us all. She'd played the perfect daughter, in law for 8 years, waiting for the right moment to execute her plan. Mrs. Chen, there's something else, Detective Walsh said gently. Jessica's pregnant. Pregnant? The news stunned me. How far along? About 3 months. She claims David is the father. But given her history, we're running DNA tests. I tried to process this information. Jessica was carrying what might be my grandchild, and she'd been planning to murder me. The complexity of my emotions was overwhelming. Does David know? She told him after they were arrested. He's having a difficult time processing everything. That evening, Elena came to visit. She'd been checking on me regularly since the arrests, helping me navigate the practical aspects of the legal proceedings while also providing emotional support. How are you holding up? She asked as we sat in my kitchen drinking tea. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, I said. All the red flags that seem so obvious now. Mrs. Chen? You couldn't have known. Jessica fooled everyone, David, your neighbors, even me. She's had years of practice. But what kind of mother doesn't recognize when her own son is planning to kill her? Elena reached across the table and took my hand. The kind of mother who loves her son so much that she can't imagine him wanting to hurt her. That's not a failure, Mrs. Chen. That's what love looks like. I keep wondering if I could have saved David somehow. If I could have reached him before Jessica's influence became too strong. Maybe you did save him, Elena said. If you hadn't stopped this plan, David would be a murderer right now. Instead, he has a chance to face what he did and maybe find a way back to being the person you raised him to be. But the trial began 3 months later. I had dreaded this moment, having to sit in a courtroom and testify against my own son. But when the day came, I found a strength I didn't know I possessed. David looked thin and pale in his court-appointed suit. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw the boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. But I also saw the man who had handed me pills that could have killed me. Jessica, on the other hand, looked exactly the same. Perfectly groomed, carefully composed, playing the role of the innocent young wife who had been led astray. Even now, even facing murder charges, she was performing. The prosecutor played the recording from our Sunday dinner, and I watched the jury's faces as they heard David and Jessica's voices discussing the best way to drug me. Several jurors looked horrified. One older woman shook her head in disgust. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and honestly about everything I had experienced. I talked about the financial help I'd given David and Jessica, about the conversation I'd overheard, about the fear I'd lived with for weeks. Mrs. Chen, the prosecutor asked, when your son handed you those pills, what went through your mind? I thought about all the times I'd given him medicine when he was sick, I said, looking directly at David. I thought about how I trusted him to take care of me when I got old, and I realized that the person handing me those pills wasn't the son I had raised. David was crying silently, his shoulders shaking with the weight of what he'd done. Jessica's defense attorney tried to paint her as a loving wife who had been genuinely trying to help with my sleep problems. But the evidence was overwhelming, the notebooks documenting my routine, the history of her previous husband's deaths, the fact that the pills David gave me were not legally prescribed. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Jessica Martinez was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and fraud. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and elder abuse, but the jury recommended leniency due to what they termed extreme emotional manipulation. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. After the sentencing, I was allowed a brief visit with David before he was transferred to state prison. Mom, he said as soon as I sat down across from him in the small visiting room, I'm so sorry. I don't know how I let this happen. David, I need you to understand something, I said. What Jessica did to you, the manipulation, the lies, the way she twisted your thinking, that doesn't excuse what you did, but it helps explain it. I loved you, he said, tears streaming down his face. Even when I was planning to hurt you. I thought I was helping. She convinced me you were suffering, that you wanted to die but were too afraid to say so. I know you thought that. But David, you have to take responsibility for your choices. Jessica may have planted the ideas, but you chose to act on them. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at my son, really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time in years, I saw the weak spots in his character that Jessica had exploited, but I also saw genuine remorse and the possibility of redemption. I forgive you, I said. But more importantly, you need to forgive yourself. And then you need to use these next 15 years to become the man I raised you to be. What about the baby? He asked quietly. The DNA tests had confirmed that David was the father of Jessica's child. The baby would be born while Jessica was in prison, and then placed in foster care unless a family member stepped forward. We'll figure that out when the time comes, I said. During the months that followed, I slowly began to rebuild my life. Elena continued her visits, transitioning from home health aide to genuine friend. Mrs. Patterson checked on me daily, bringing casseroles and gossip from the neighborhood. Detective Walsh stopped by occasionally, updating me on the ongoing investigation into Jessica's past victims. We've connected her to at least 2 more suspicious deaths, she told me during one visit. Elderly men she dated before her marriages. The families are finally getting answers about what really happened to their loved ones. I found comfort in knowing that Jessica's arrest had brought justice not just for me, but for other families who had lost people they loved to her calculated cruelty. 6 months after the trial, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to visit Jessica in prison. The women's correctional facility was a grim, sterile place that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Jessica looked different without her careful makeup and styled hair, younger, somehow, but also harder. Why are you here? She asked when I sat down across from her in the visiting room. I wanted to understand, I said. I wanted to know why you chose to hurt so many people. Jessica studied me for a long moment, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something genuine in her expression, not remorse, exactly, but a kind of cold honesty. Because I could, she said simply. Because lonely old people are easy targets, and nobody really investigates when they die. Because I'm good at making people trust me. What about the baby? Don't you care what kind of life your child will have? For just a moment, something flickered across Jessica's face, pain maybe, or regret. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. The baby will be better off without me, she said, just like everyone else. I left the prison feeling strangely at peace. I had looked evil in the face and found it to be exactly what I'd expected, empty, selfish, and ultimately pitiable. That night, I called the social services office and began the process of applying for custody of Jessica's baby. At 73 years old, I was going to become a mother again. 1 year later, I was sitting in the same kitchen where I'd first heard David and Jessica planning my death, but everything had changed. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. The counters were covered with baby bottles and formula, and in my arms was 3-month-old Emma Chen, my granddaughter, and the most beautiful thing to come out of this entire nightmare. Emma had David's dark hair and serious eyes, but thankfully, none of Jessica's calculating coldness. She was pure innocence, completely unaware that her mother was a convicted murderer and her father was serving 15 years in prison for conspiracy to kill her great-grandmother. Mrs. Chen, you look happy, Elena said as she helped me sterilize bottles. She'd become more than a friend over the past year. She was my co-conspirator in raising Emma, my voice of reason when the task felt overwhelming, and my reminder that family isn't always about blood. I am happy, I said, and meant it. I never thought I'd say that again after everything that happened. But I am? Are you sure you're not taking on too much? Raising a baby at 73. Elena? A year ago I thought my life was over. I was a lonely widow whose son wanted to kill her for money. Now I'm a mother again, with a second chance to raise a child right. How could that be too much? The road to getting custody of Emma hadn't been easy. Social services had questioned whether a woman my age could properly care for an infant. Jessica's family, what little existed of it, had challenged my petition, claiming I was too old and that my relationship with their daughter was adversarial. But Detective Walsh had testified on my behalf, explaining how I'd stopped a serial killer and potentially saved countless other lives. Elena had provided character references and offered to help with childcare. Even Mrs. Patterson had written a letter to the court, describing me as the most capable and loving mother she'd ever known. Most surprisingly, David had signed papers from prison, formally requesting that I be given custody of his daughter. "She deserves better than the foster system," he'd written in a letter to the judge. "My mother is the strongest, most loving person I know. Despite what I did to her, she's willing to love my child. Emma couldn't have a better guardian." The custody hearing had been emotional and exhausting, but when the judge announced that Emma would be placed permanently in my care, I'd felt something I hadn't experienced since Robert died, a sense of purpose, of being needed, of having something beautiful to live for. "Mrs. Chen," the judge had said, "this court recognizes that you've shown extraordinary courage in exposing a dangerous criminal and extraordinary compassion in caring for her innocent child. We believe Emma will be fortunate to have you as her guardian." Now, 6 months later, Emma and I had settled into a routine that felt both foreign and familiar. Night feedings reminded me of David's infancy, but this time I wasn't a 24-year-old new mother terrified of making mistakes. I was a woman with decades of experience in love loss and resilience. "She's getting so big," Mrs. Patterson said as she stopped by for her daily visit. At 86, she'd become Emma's honorary great-grandmother, bringing homemade baby food and endless patience for holding a fussy infant. "The pediatrician says she's perfectly healthy," I reported proudly. "No developmental delays, no signs of any problems from Jessica's pregnancy, good genes from the Chen side," Mrs. Patterson declared, making faces at Emma until she giggled. "This little one is going to be just fine." I hope she was right. One of my biggest fears was that Emma might somehow inherit Jessica's capacity for manipulation and cruelty. But so far, she seemed like any normal baby, crying when she was hungry, sleeping when she was tired, and responding to love with smiles and contentment. "Have you heard from David recently?" Elena asked as we prepared Emma's afternoon bottle. "He calls every Sunday," I said. "He's doing well in prison, actually. He's enrolled in counseling, working in the library, taking correspondence courses in accounting. I think he's finding himself again." It had taken months for David and me to rebuild any kind of relationship. Our phone calls had been stilted and painful at first, full of apologies and awkward silences. But gradually, we'd found our way back to something resembling a mother-son connection. "I think about what I did every day," he'd told me during our most recent conversation. "Not just the plan to hurt you, but all the smaller choices that led up to that moment. The lies I told myself, the way I let Jessica twist my thinking, the way I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as an obstacle." "David, what's done is done," I'd replied. "What matters now is what you do with the rest of your life." "I want to be the kind of father Emma can be proud of someday," he'd said. "Even if I can't be there to raise her, I want to be someone she can respect. Then focus on becoming that person. One day at a time, one choice at a time." The doorbell rang, interrupting my memories. I handed Emma to Alina and went to answer it, expecting to find Mrs. Patterson returning for something she'd forgotten. Instead, I found Detective Walsh standing on my front porch, holding a thick manila envelope. "Detective Walsh! This is a surprise. Come in, please. Or Mrs. Chen, I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I have some news about Jessica's case that I wanted to share with you personally." We settled in the living room, where Alina was entertaining Emma with silly songs. Detective Walsh accepted a cup of coffee and opened her envelope. "We've been working with law enforcement agencies across 3 states, investigating suspicious deaths that might be connected to Jessica," she began. "As of today, we've identified 7 confirmed victims spanning a 12-year period. 7 people. Jessica had been killing for 12 years before she ever met David." "All elderly men?" I asked. 6 men, 1 woman. The woman was Dorothy Martinez, Ronald's mother. She died 6 months after Jessica married Ronald, supposedly from mixing up her heart medication. "We think Jessica killed her because Dorothy was suspicious of her and threatening to cut Ronald out of her will." I looked over at Emma, sleeping peacefully in Alina's arms, and felt a surge of protective anger. This innocent child was the daughter of a woman who had spent more than a decade murdering elderly people for money. "There's more," Detective Walsh continued. "We've been in contact with Jessica's cellmate, a woman serving time for fraud. According to her, Jessica has been bragging about other victims we haven't identified yet. She claims to have killed at least a dozen old fools over the years. Will she ever tell you the truth about all of them? I doubt it. Jessica seems to enjoy having information that we want. She's using it to try to negotiate better prison conditions." Detective Walsh reached into her envelope again and pulled out a photograph. Mrs. Chen, do you recognize this man? I studied the photograph carefully. It showed an elderly man, maybe in his late 70s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. I think I might have seen him before, but I can't remember where. His name was Thomas Chen, no relation to you, despite the shared last name. He died 3 years ago in Portland, Oregon, supposedly from an accidental overdose of diabetes medication. 3 years ago. But Jessica was already married to David then. That's what makes this interesting. We think Jessica was still actively hunting for victims even after she married David. Thomas Chen was wealthy, recently widowed, and had no close family. He'd placed a personal ad in a senior dating website, looking for companionship. The implications hit me like ice water. She was planning to leave David. Or she was planning to kill you both and disappear with the inheritance money. We may never know for sure. But Thomas Chen's death has Jessica's signature all over it. After Detective Walsh left, I sat in Robert's chair, holding Emma and trying to process everything I'd learned. My granddaughter was the child of a woman who had killed at least 7 people, possibly more. A woman who had been actively hunting for new victims even while planning to murder me. What do you think? Little one, I whispered to Emma. How do we make sure you grow up to be nothing like your mother? Emma gurgled and grabbed at my finger with her tiny hand. That's right, I said. We do it one day at a time, one choice at a time. Just like I told your daddy. That evening, as I was putting Emma to bed in the nursery I'd set up in what used to be David's room, the phone rang. It was David, calling for his weekly check-in. Hi Mom, how's Emma doing? She's perfect? I said, settling into the rocking chair beside her crib. She rolled over by herself yesterday, and she's starting to laugh when I make faces at her. I wish I could see that, David said wistfully. I'm taking lots of pictures. I'll bring them when I visit next month. We'd established a routine of monthly visits, though seeing David in prison was always emotionally difficult. He looked older each time, more serious, but also somehow cleaner, as if prison had stripped away the desperation and weakness that Jessica had exploited. Mom, Detective Walsh called me today. She told me about the other victims they've identified. I heard about that too. I keep thinking about how many people I could have saved if I'd reported Jessica earlier, if I'd seen through her manipulation, if I'd been stronger. David, you can't think that way. Jessica had been killing people for 12 years before she ever met you. Her crimes aren't your responsibility. But I was planning to help her kill you. The pain in his voice was raw and genuine. We'd had this conversation before. But David's guilt was something he struggled with daily. Yes, you were, I said gently. And that was wrong and terrible, and I'll never fully understand how you got to that point. But David, you also stopped yourself. When it came down to it, when push came to shove, you couldn't go through with actually harming me. Because you exposed us before I had the chance. Because some part of you, the part that Jessica couldn't reach, knew it was wrong. We were both quiet for a moment, listening to Emma's soft breathing through the phone. Tell me about her, David said finally. Tell me what she's like. She's curious, I said, watching Emma sleep. She stares at everything like she's trying to figure out how the world works. She loves music, especially when Mrs. Patterson sings to her, and she has your stubborn streak. When she doesn't want to take a nap, she fights it until she literally falls asleep sitting up. David laughed, and I realized it was the first time I'd heard him laugh since before Robert died. She sounds perfect. She is. And David, she's going to know who her father is. I'm not going to hide your existence from her. But I'm also not going to lie about where you are or why you're there. What will you tell her about Jessica? I'd thought about this question many times. How do you explain to a child that her mother is a serial killer? How do you help her understand that she comes from darkness, but doesn't have to be defined by it? I'll tell her that her mother was very sick in a way that made her hurt people, I said finally. And that her father made some terrible mistakes, but is working very hard to become a better man. And that she has a great grandmother who loves her more than anything in the world and will make sure she grows up knowing right from wrong. Do you think she'll be okay? Growing up with all this hanging over her. David, Emma is going to grow up in a house full of love, with people who will teach her kindness and honesty and compassion. She'll know her history, but she won't be defined by it. She'll have every opportunity to become whoever she wants to be. I hope you're right. I am right, because I'm not raising her alone. Alana is like a second mother to her already. Mrs. Patterson spoils her rotten. Detective Walsh stops by regularly to check on us. Even some of the neighbors I barely knew before have become part of Emma's extended family. It sounds like she has a whole village. She does. And when you get out of prison, if you've done the work you need to do, you can be part of that village too. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of Emma's nursery, listening to her breathe and thinking about second chances. Jessica had thrown away every opportunity for redemption, choosing cruelty and selfishness until there was nothing left of whatever good might have once existed in her. But David was different. He'd made terrible choices, but he was facing the consequences and working to become better. And Emma was a clean slate, a chance for our family to start over and get it right this time. 6 months later, on Emma's first birthday, I threw a party that would have made Robert proud. The house was filled with people who had become our chosen family, Elena and her husband and children, Mrs. Patterson and several other neighbors, Detective Walsh and her teenage daughter, even David's old friend Mike, who had stayed in touch despite everything. Emma sat in her high chair, covered in chocolate cake and grinning at everyone like she was the queen of the world. She was walking now, chattering in a language only she understood, and had developed a fascination with books that reminded me of Robert. "She's beautiful, Maggie," Mike said as he helped me clean up after the party. "David would be so proud." "He is proud. He calls her his little miracle." "How's he doing?" "Really? Better. He's got 2 years left on his sentence, maybe less with good behavior. He's completed his GED, finished an associate degree in business, and he's been working with a counselor on understanding how he got so lost." "Do you think he'll be okay when he gets out?" I looked around my living room, decorated with birthday streamers and filled with the evidence of a life rebuilt from tragedy. Emma was playing with wrapping paper on the floor, Alina was helping Mrs. Patterson with the dishes, and everything felt peaceful and right. "I think we're all going to be okay," I said. That night, after everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep in her crib, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my old journal, the one I'd started writing in when I first overheard David and Jessica's plan. I hadn't looked at it in months, but something had prompted me to pull it out tonight. Reading through those early entries was like revisiting a different life. The fear, the confusion, the desperate hope that I was misunderstanding what I'd heard, it all felt foreign now. That woman who had hidden at the top of the stairs, terrified of her own son, seemed like a stranger. But she wasn't a stranger. She was me at my most vulnerable moment, facing an impossible situation with courage I didn't know I possessed. I turned to a fresh page and began to write, "Dear Emma, today you turned 1 year old, and I want you to know that this has been the most wonderful year of my life since your great-grandfather died. You have brought joy back into this house, laughter back into my days, and purpose back into my heart. Someday, when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you the whole story of how you came to be mine. It's not a fairy tale, sweetheart. It's a story about people making terrible choices and good people getting hurt, and the long, difficult work of healing and forgiveness. But it's also a story about love. About the love that made me fight to protect myself so I could be here for you. About the love that made your daddy face his mistakes and work to become better. About the love that brought together all the people who helped me take care of you now. You were born into darkness, Emma, but you are light. You are proof that something beautiful can come from the worst circumstances. You are our family's second chance, our hope for the future, our reminder that love really can conquer all. I don't know how many years I have left with you, but I promise to use every single day to teach you that you are worthy of love, that you have the power to choose kindness, and that your past doesn't define your future. You are my granddaughter, my joy, my miracle. And I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Great, Grandma Maggie. I closed the journal and looked around my kitchen one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, teething, tantrums, the endless work of raising a child. But tonight, I was content. I had survived attempted murder by my own son. I had faced down a serial killer and lived to tell about it. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal and found something more beautiful than I'd ever imagined possible. At 74 years old, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not as a victim, not as a lonely widow, but as a mother, a protector, and a woman who had learned that it's never too late to start over. And in the nursery down the hall, Emma slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams fill the hearts of innocent children. completely unaware that she was the most important thing in the world to the woman who would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep her safe. Just as it should be. Just as love demands.